Hello, folks. What you're about to watch isn't just another crime story. It's a wake-up call for every one of us. I spent 40 years as a family doctor in a small Midwestern town much like Oakwood. I've seen my share of troubling cases, but nothing prepared me for the story I'm about to share with you. Remember when neighborhoods used to look out for each other? When we knew the families on our street, when we noticed if something wasn't right? These days, we're all so busy minding our own business that we miss the warning signs right in front of us. This story is about a doctor who didn't look away, who followed his gut when something felt wrong. And thank God he did, because his actions saved two lives that night. So pour yourself a drink and pay attention. This isn't some Hollywood drama. This happened in real America in a neighborhood just like yours. And the lessons here might just help you recognize when someone in your community needs help but can't ask for it. What would you do if you suspected something terrible was happening to a child? Would you have the courage to act? Let's find out. A girl acted strangely around her dad in the clinic, avoiding eye contact and fidgeting nervously in her chair. At first, the staff thought it was typical appointment anxiety, but when the doctor performed an ultrasound, he stared at the screen in disbelief and began to panic. The early evening air settled over Oakwood, a modest city nestled in Wayne County, Michigan. Dr. Robert Miller glanced at his watch as he hurried out of the examination room. At 52, he had established himself as a respected family physician in the suburban neighborhood, and his independent clinic, opened just a few years ago, was steadily building a patient base. Maria, Dr. Miller called, approaching the nurse station. This was left behind by Mrs. Hernandez. He handed over a prescription eyeglass case to the nurse on duty. "I'll call her right away," Maria replied, taking the case and placing it in the desk drawer. As Dr. Miller turned to head back to his examination room, he scanned the waiting area, now mostly empty. As closing time approached, his eyes landed on a pair seated in the corner. A stocky man in a blue polo shirt and a young girl in a red hoodie. Recognition flashed across his face. "James," Dr. Miller called out, walking over with a warm smile. "James Davidson, right? I didn't know you were coming in today." James rose to his feet, extending his hand. "Dr. Miller, good to see you. We're neighbors, James. You can call me Robert outside the clinic." He turned his attention to the girl, who kept her eyes fixed on the floor. "And this must be Emily. I don't think we've properly met before, though I've seen you around the neighborhood." Emily barely acknowledged him with a slight nod, never lifting her gaze. "We'll be with you shortly," Dr. Miller assured them. Just finishing up some paperwork. Back in his examination room, Dr. Miller settled behind his desk, organizing the charts from his previous patient. A moment later, Maria Garcia, his nurse assistant, entered the room. She began methodically sanitizing the examination table and equipment, preparing for the next patient. Dr. Miller," Maria said in a lowered voice. "There's something strange about that father and daughter out there." Dr. Miller looked up from his paperwork. "What do you mean?" Maria's brow furrowed as she wiped down the ultrasound machine. "When I took the girl's vitals, her father wouldn't let her speak, not even to give her own name. He kept answering everything for her." She shook her head. "I had to keep reminding him that I needed to hear from her directly." "And the girl, Emily, she won't make eye contact. Not once." Dr. Miller leaned back in his chair. "I know them, Maria. They live just 3 houses down from me." James can be a bit authoritative. "Some fathers are like that." "I'm Mexican too, Dr. Miller," Maria replied. "And this isn't cultural. This is something else." She paused, then shrugged. "But you know them better than I do." "Maybe it's just how their family dynamic works." She handed him the girl's chart, and Dr. Miller's eyes widened as he reviewed the listed symptoms. 14 years old with pregnancy symptoms," he murmured. Maria nodded grimly. "That's why I'm concerned." "Send them in," Dr. Miller said, straightening his white coat and composing his expression. The door opened, and James guided Emily into the room with a firm hand on her shoulder. The girl moved as if she were walking on eggshells, her body tense, her red hoodie hanging loosely over her frame. "Thank you for seeing us, Doctor," James said, taking the chair beside the examination table. "Especially this late." "Of course," Dr. Miller replied. "What seems to be the problem?" James cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "It's not easy to say this, but my daughter is pregnant." Despite having seen it on the chart hearing, its stated so bluntly made Dr. Miller's stomach tighten. He looked at Emily, who remained silent, staring at her hands folded in her lap. "I see," Dr. Miller said carefully. "Emily, how have you been feeling?" Before she could answer, James interjected. She's been having morning sickness, fatigue, and lately she's been complaining about abdominal pain. Dr. Miller kept his focus on Emily. Emily, would you prefer to answer these questions yourself? The girl gave a barely perceptible nod. And how did this pregnancy occur? Directing his question to Emily again. James answered, she has a boyfriend. We don't want to talk about him. His tone made it clear the subject was closed. Dr. James continued, leaning forward. We need this to stay confidential. No one can know about this. Not our neighbors, not anyone. Patient. Confidentiality is standard protocol. Mr. Davidson, Dr. Miller assured him, though he found the emphasis odd. I can't discuss any patient's case with others. Good, good. James nodded. Dr. Miller turned to Emily. I'd like to perform an ultrasound to check on the baby and determine how far along you are. Is that okay with you? Emily, she nodded, still not meeting his eyes. Maria will help you onto the examination table, Dr. Miller said, preparing the ultrasound machine. You'll need to lift your shirt just above your abdomen. Maria gently guided Emily to the table. The girl winced as she lay back. Does that hurt, Maria? Asked softly. Emily nodded. The abdominal pain has been getting worse, James explained from his chair. Dr. Miller applied the gel to Emily's abdomen, noting how she flinched at his touch. He moved the transducer across her belly, watching the screen intently. What he saw made him pause. He began adjusting the machine for a better view. Emily, you appear to be approximately 28 weeks pregnant. James's eyes widened. That can't be right. It hasn't been that long. Dr. Miller looked at him sharply. Have you taken her to an obstetrician before? No, James said. This is our first doctor visit, Dr. Miller continued, examining the ultrasound image. It's a girl, he said, then frowned. But I'm seeing some concerning signs. Her abdomen doesn't match typical growth patterns for 28 weeks. This suggests what we call intrauterine growth restriction, or IUGR. What does that mean, James asked. It means the baby isn't growing at a normal rate. This can happen due to problems with the placenta, maternal health issues, or fetal conditions. Dr. Miller moved the transducer again, monitoring carefully. I'm also detecting an irregular fetal heartbeat. He turned to face James directly. Miss Davidson, I strongly recommend you take Emily to the hospital immediately. She needs specialized care that I can't provide here in my clinic. James's face darkened. Why can't you just give her some medicine? This requires advanced monitoring and possibly intervention. Dr. Miller explained patiently. The hospital has the equipment and specialists needed to monitor the baby's development properly. They can perform Doppler studies to assess blood flow to the baby and check for any organ under development. James looked resistant, but Dr. Miller continued firmly. I can give you a prescription for prenatal, vitamins, calcium, and folic acid to help with nutrition, but that's not enough. She needs to be seen at the hospital. He wrote out the prescription and handed it to James. The pharmacy next door is still open. You can fill this while Nurse Maria helps clean up. Emily, James glanced hesitantly between the doctor and his daughter. She'll be fine, Dr. Miller assured him. We'll just clean off the gel and print out the ultrasound images. She'll join you at the pharmacy in a few minutes. James reluctantly took the prescription and left the room, looking back at Emily one last time before closing the door. As soon as he was gone, Maria began gently wiping the gel from Emily's abdomen. You're going to be okay, sweetie, she said softly. Emily's eyes suddenly welled with tears. She kicks when she hears his voice. She whispered, I hate that she likes him. Dr. Miller and Maria exchanged alarmed glances. The statement hung in the air, pregnant with ambiguous meaning. Emily, Dr. Miller said carefully, what do you mean by that? But Emily had retreated back into silence. Her momentary openness vanished. Dr. Miller tried to make sense of her words. Perhaps she was upset about her pregnancy and projecting those feelings onto her father. Or maybe James had been angry about the pregnancy and she was expressing resentment. What's done is done, he said gently. Your father brought you here because he cares about your health. Now we need to focus on making sure you and the baby are okay. That's why it's so important that you go to the hospital right away. He handed Emily the printed ultrasound image and she took it, her gaze fixed on the black and white picture. To her eyes, the image looked more like an abstract blur than anything recognizable. Through the glass panel in the door, Dr. Miller could see James returning from the pharmacy. The moment was lost. Maria helped Emily sit up and they prepared to leave. Dr. Miller watched as James collected his daughter, his hand firmly on her shoulder as they exited the clinic. After James and Emily left, Maria returned to the examination room, her face troubled as she gathered the remaining ultrasound printouts. Manishiro, she announced, looking at her watch. That's it for today, right? Dr. Miller nodded, still disturbed by Emily's cryptic statement. Yes, they were our last patients. Maria began shutting down the ultrasound machine, her movements brisk, but her expression pensive. That was strange, don't you think? She finally asked the girl, hiding her pregnancy for 28 weeks, and what she said when her father left the room. I know Dr. Miller agreed, leaning against his desk. It was definitely unusual. What do you think she meant? Maria pressed about the baby kicking when she hears his voice, and her saying she hates that the baby likes him. Miller ran a hand through his hair. I'm assuming she must have hidden the pregnancy from her father all this time. That's why he only just brought her in. Maybe he was angry when he found out, and that's why she's expressing those feelings. Maria wasn't convinced. But she specifically said the baby kicks when she hears her father's voice, and she doesn't like that. Doesn't that seem odd to you? It could be teenage hormones colliding with pregnancy hormones, Dr. Miller suggested, though the explanation felt insufficient even to him. Mood swings and emotional volatility are common in both. Maria nodded slowly, though doubt lingered in her eyes. I hope they go to the hospital like you told them to. Me too, Dr. Miller said. That baby needs proper monitoring. They finished closing the clinic, turning off lights and locking cabinets. The other staff had already departed, leaving just the two of them to secure the building. They walked out together into the cool night air, the parking lot nearly empty. Have a good night, Dr. Maria said, heading toward her car. You too, Maria. See you tomorrow. Dr. Miller climbed into his sedan, the engine humming to life as he pulled out of the parking lot. His mind kept replaying the examination, searching for clues in the interaction between father and daughter. Something felt off, but he couldn't quite place it. As he turned into his neighborhood, the streetlights cast long shadows on the quiet suburban street. He slowed as he approached the Davidson residence, 3 houses away from his own. Their car was parked in the driveway. They didn't go to the hospital, he muttered to himself, a flicker of concern igniting in his chest. He continued driving to his house, pulled into his driveway, and shut off the engine. Sitting in the darkness of his car, he debated with himself. Maybe they didn't understand the seriousness of the situation. The irregular heartbeat, the growth restriction. These weren't minor issues, especially for a 14-year-old mother. He should just go inside, have dinner, and call it a night. It wasn't his responsibility to chase down patients who ignored his medical advice. But Emily's words echoed in his mind. She kicks when she hears his voice. I hate that she likes him. With a sigh, Dr. Miller got out of his car and walked back down the street to the Davidson house. The lights were on inside, a warm glow emanating from the windows. He hesitated, then knocked firmly on the front door. After a moment, the door swung open and James stood there, surprise flashing across his face before he composed it into a neutral expression to Miller. Is everything okay? I was just checking in, Dr. Miller said, trying to keep his tone casual. I noticed your car was here and I was concerned since I had recommended you take Emily to the hospital right away. James Bond's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Ah, yes, thank you for your concern. Emily has gone to the hospital with her mother. I stayed behind to finish some work. Dr. Miller blinked, caught off guard by this information. This was the first mention of Emily's mother being in the picture, I see, he said carefully. That's good to hear. I was worried about the baby's condition. Yes? Well, she's in good hands now, James said, his tone clipped. Thank you for stopping by, doctor, but it's getting late and I have work to finish. Of course, Dr. Miller nodded. Sorry to disturb you. Good night, Mr. Davidson. Good night. The door shut firmly behind him, leaving Dr. Miller standing on the porch with annoying unease in his gut. As he made his way back home, James's explanation played over in his mind. He could only hope it had been the truth. Inside his kitchen, Dr. Miller opened the refrigerator and stared at its contents. His appetite diminished by the nagging sense that something was wrong with the girl. He grabbed leftovers from the previous night's dinner chicken pasta and placed it in the microwave. As he waited for his food to heat, Maria's concerns echoed in his mind. The way James had controlled the conversation, answering questions meant for Emily, the girl's reluctance to make eye contact, her cryptic comment about the baby, and now James's claim that Emily had gone to the hospital with her mother. The microwave beeped, but Dr. Miller barely noticed. A realization struck him. Despite living just 3 houses away from the Davidson family for over a year, he had rarely seen Emily or her mother outside. He knew James had a daughter, but their interactions had been limited to the occasional wave from the driveway or brief exchanges at neighborhood gatherings, always with James alone. As for his wife, he couldn't even recall the last time he'd seen her. He took his plate to his home office, a small room with a desk computer and bookshelves lined with medical texts. Setting his dinner aside, he opened his laptop and navigated to Facebook. This probably crosses some professional boundaries, he muttered to himself, but something isn't right. He searched for James Davidson and quickly found his profile. James's privacy settings were minimal, allowing Dr. Miller to browse through his photos and information. He scrolled through the friend list, searching for someone who might be Emily's mother, Sarah Bennett. He read aloud. The name rang faintly familiar, as if he'd heard it long ago. Her profile picture tugged at something deep in his memory. The woman's face bore a subtle resemblance to Emily, and he was almost certain he had seen her before somewhere in the past. He clicked on the profile, scanning through the limited information visible to the public. Sarah's page had few recent photos with James or Emily. In fact, scrolling through her timeline, Dr. Miller noticed a distinct absence of family photos for several years. There were pictures of Sarah at work, events with friends, but none with her daughter. If they're divorced, that would make sense, he mused aloud. But then why would James say Emily went to the hospital with her? Miller knew he was stepping outside professional boundaries by investigating his patient's family this way, but Emily's well-being and potentially her safety overrode his hesitation. He clicked on the messenger icon and began typing a message to Sarah. Hello, Ms. Bennett, I apologize for contacting you this way, but I'm Dr. Robert Miller, a family physician who saw your daughter Emily today. I just wanted to check how the hospital visit is going again. Sorry for the intrusion. He hesitated before hitting send, aware that this message might anger her or cause confusion. But concern for Emily won out and he sent the message. Dr. Miller ate his dinner while occasionally glancing at the screen for a response. None came. He cleaned his plate, changed into more comfortable clothes, and prepared for bed, checking his phone one last time before turning in. As he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his phone chimed with a notification. He grabbed it quickly, seeing a message from Sarah Bennett. What hospital visit? Is something wrong with Emily? Before he could type a response, his phone began ringing. A Facebook call from Sarah. He sat up in bed and answered. Hello, Dr. Miller speaking. Doctor, what's going on? Sarah's voice was tense with worry. What do you mean about a hospital visit? I'm not at any hospital with Emily. Miller's stomach sank. Ms. Bennett, I saw your daughter at my clinic this evening. She was brought in by her father, James. She's pregnant, approximately 28 weeks along. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. That's impossible, Sarah whispered. I haven't seen Emily in almost 3 years. James and I have been divorced for 10 years. He has full custody, and I'm not allowed near her. Miller closed his eyes, pieces beginning to fall into place. Ms. Bennett, I need to explain the situation clearly. Emily came to my clinic with James this evening. She's in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy with intrauterine growth restriction, which means the fetus isn't growing at a normal rate. This can happen due to problems with the placenta, maternal health issues, or fetal conditions. He paused to take a breath. I also detected an irregular fetal heartbeat. I advised them to go to the hospital immediately so specialists could perform Doppler studies and assess the baby's development. If there's organ underdevelopment, especially in the lungs and brain, there are treatments that could help before it's too late. Sarah was silent for a long moment before responding. Oh my God. She finally said, her voice breaking. My baby, she's only 14. How could this happen? Who did this to her? James said, she has a boyfriend. Miller replied, though he was now questioning everything James had told him. I don't know what to do, Sarah said, sounding overwhelmed. I want to see her right now, but I'm not allowed anywhere near her, the restraining order. She broke off. Please, doctor, make sure she's okay. If she's not, call the police. I don't care if James reports me for violating the order. This is my daughter we're talking about. I understand, Dr. Miller assured her, but we need to be careful. Emily is in a delicate condition and we don't want to trigger premature labor by causing her additional stress. You're right, Sarah agreed reluctantly. What will you do? I'll check on her again. Dr. Miller promised, and I'll keep you updated. For now, it's probably best if you stay where you are. After ending the call, Doctor accessed his clinic's electronic medical records from his laptop. He pulled up the poem. Ultrasound images from Emily's examination, studying them carefully. The images confirmed his initial assessment: restricted growth, potentially compromised placental function, and concerning indications of decreased blood flow to the fetus. This meant less oxygen and fewer nutrients were reaching the baby, a situation that could rapidly deteriorate. The clock on his bedside table read 10:15 p.m. It was late for house calls, but the man had clearly lied to him while his daughter needed medical attention. Dr. Miller decided this couldn't wait until morning. By then, the man might be at work or come up with another excuse. Dr. Miller quickly changed back into street clothes and headed out of his house. The night had grown cooler, a light fog beginning to settle over the suburban neighborhood. The Davidson house stood silhouetted against the night sky, its windows still illuminated. He approached the front door with determination, prepared to confront James about his lie and insist that Emily receive immediate medical care. He knocked firmly, rehearsing what he would say when James answered. But when the door opened, it wasn't James who stood in the doorway. It was Emily. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of him. "Dr. Miller," she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Emily." "Bud," he said gently, "did you go to the hospital?" She shook her head, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her hoodie. "Emily, I need you to tell me the truth." Dr. Miller said, keeping his voice low. "What's happening here? Why did you hide your pregnancy for so long?" Emily opened her mouth to speak, but before she could say anything, James's voice boomed from inside the house. "Who is it, Emily? Is that the delivery guy? What's taking so long?" Fear flashed across Emily's face. "Please go," she whispered, already closing the door. "Please," Dr. Miller put his hand on the door to stop it from closing completely. "Emily, I can help you. Let me help you. I can't." She breathed, pushing the door shut. Dr. Miller stood on the porch, torn. Technically, he had done his duty. He'd informed James of the risks and urged him to seek hospital care. He couldn't force them to follow his advice, but something about that house felt off, deeply wrong, and he couldn't bring himself to walk away. He had made a promise to Sarah, and that promise still held weight. As he turned to leave, the front door swung open again. This time James stood in the doorway, his expression dark with annoyance. "Dr. Miller," he said, voice tight, "why do you keep coming to my house? It's late in the evening." Mr. Davidson, Dr. Miller began, struggling to keep his tone professional. "I'm concerned about Emily's condition. You told me she had gone to the hospital with her mother, but I've just learned that's not true." James's jaw tightened. "You've been checking up on me. Who I take my daughter to see is none of your business. As her physician, her health is my business," Dr. Miller countered. "The baby's condition is serious. Delaying treatment could lead to complications or worse." James glared at him, about to respond, when a light came on in the neighbor's house next door. A curtain twitched, someone clearly watching the late-night confrontation unfolding on the porch. James's demeanor shifted abruptly. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside," he suggested, his voice suddenly conciliatory. "No need to disturb the whole neighborhood." Dr. Miller hesitated, then nodded. James stepped back, allowing him to enter the house. The living room was sparsely decorated with a worn couch, a coffee table, and a television mounted on the wall. Emily sat on the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the floor. "Emily," Dr. Miller said gently. "How are you feeling?" James interrupted before she could answer. "She's fine, just tired. Pregnant women get tired, right? Doctor. Miller turned to face James directly. "Mr. Davidson, you need to understand the seriousness of the situation. The ultrasound showed intrauterine growth restriction and an irregular fetal heartbeat. These conditions require immediate medical attention, and we'll get that attention," James replied, his tone placating but his eyes cold. "First thing tomorrow morning." "Why wait?" Dr. Miller, impressed. "Why not tonight?" "Because it's late," James said, gesturing at the clock on the wall. "Emily needs rest. She's exhausted, and dragging her to an emergency room where we'll sit for hours isn't what she needs right now. The baby could be in distress," Dr. Miller argued. "Every hour counts in a situation like this." James's expression hardened. "The baby won't die overnight." Dr. Miller flinched at the callousness of the statement. Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. James's shoulders relaxed slightly. "That'll be the delivery. I ordered dinner for us." He turned to Emily. "Wait here with the doctor. I'll get the food." As James walked to the door, Dr. Miller took the opportunity to move closer to Emily. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "Is there something you want to tell me?" Emily glanced toward the door where her father was paying the delivery person, looking for spare changes in his pockets. Then quickly, Emily reached into her pocket and pulled out several folded photographs. She thrust them into Dr. Miller's hand just as James turned back toward them. Dr. Miller discreetly slipped the photos into his jacket pocket without looking at them. Emily leaned closer and whispered, "More in bedroom. I'll help you, doctor," Miller promised, keeping his voice low. "You're being very brave." James returned with a pizza box. "What are you two talking about?" "Emily was telling me she's hungry," to Miller. Improvised smoothly, "Which is good. She needs proper nutrition, see? I'm a good father," James said, placing the pizza on the coffee table. "I make sure she eats well." He turned to Dr. Miller, his demeanor shifting from defensive to dismissive. "Now, I appreciate your concern, doctor, but it's getting late. As you said yourself, pregnant women need rest. If she doesn't get proper sleep, that would be bad for the baby too, wouldn't it?" Dr. Miller recognized the dismissal. "Yes, rest is important," he conceded. "But so is medical care, and she'll get it first thing tomorrow morning," James insisted. "I promise." Seeing no way to push further without escalating the situation, Dr. Miller reluctantly headed toward the door. "I'll check in tomorrow to see how the hospital visit went," he said, a clear message that he wouldn't let this drop. "Of course," James replied, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Good night, doctor." As Dr. Miller left, he glanced back through the window and saw James and Emily sitting at the table, the pizza box open between them. James was talking, his gestures animated, while Emily sat motionless, her eyes downcast. Once back in his house, Dr. Miller quickly pulled the photographs from his pocket. What he saw made his blood run cold. There were 4 photos, each showing Emily in various stages of undress on what appeared to be a bed, with James clearly visible in the images. The photos documented abuse in graphic detail. "My God," Dr. Miller whispered, his hands shaking with rage and disgust. He quickly placed the photos face down on his desk, unable to look at them any longer. Emily's words from the clinic echoed in his mind with horrifying new context. "She kicks when she hears his voice. I hate that she likes him." The truth crashed down on him like a physical weight. James wasn't just Emily's father. He was the father of her baby. There was no boyfriend. There was only a predator, and his victim living just 3 houses away. Dr. Miller reached for his phone and dialed 911. "Emergency services," came the dispatcher's voice. "What's your emergency?" "I need to report child abuse and endangerment." Dr. Miller said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "A 14-year-old girl who is 28 weeks pregnant. The father is the abuser, and the girl and her unborn child need immediate medical attention." While he waiting for the police to arrive, Dr. Miller's mind raced. The photos in his possession were damning evidence, but he needed to ensure they reached the proper authorities. He also needed to alert Sarah to what was happening. He took photos of the printed photographs of his with his phone, making sure the images were clear enough to serve as evidence if the originals were somehow lost or destroyed. Then he sent them to Sarah through Facebook Messenger, along with a brief message explaining that he had contacted the police and they were on their way back to James's house. His phone rang almost immediately, Sarah calling back. "I'm coming there right now," she said, her voice raw with emotion. "That monster. I'll kill him myself, Sarah." "Please let the police handle this," Dr. Miller urged. "They're on their way. The most important thing right now is getting Emily safely out of that house and to a hospital." "How could this happen?" Sarah sobbed. "How could he do this to his own daughter? I knew something was wrong when he fought so hard for custody, but I never thought he would." "I'm so sorry," Dr. Miller said, at a loss for more comforting words. "But Emily reached out for help tonight. She was incredibly brave, and now we can get her away from him." "I'm still coming," Sarah insisted. "I need to be there for my daughter." "Of course," Dr. Miller agreed. "Just please let the police do their job first." After hanging up, Dr. Miller paced his living room, checking the window every few minutes for signs of police arrival. It felt like hours, though. His clock told him only 20 minutes had passed since his call. Finally, he saw the flashing lights of police cruisers, turning onto their street, moving slowly without sirens, a tactical approach to avoid alerting James. Dr. Miller hurried outside to meet them. 3 police cars parked a short distance from the Davidson house. 6 officers emerged, and Dr. Miller approached the one who appeared to be in charge. "Dr. Robert Miller," he introduced himself. "I made the call." The officer nodded. "Detective Wilson, you have evidence of sexual abuse." Dr. Miller handed over the photographs. "These were given to me by the victim less than an hour ago. She indicated there are more in the house." Detective Wilson examined the photos, his expression hardening. And the girl is pregnant, yes. 28 weeks. There are serious medical concerns for both her and the baby. She needs hospital care immediately, another officer approached. The house is quiet, detective lights still on inside. Right, detective, Wilson said, handing the photos to another officer who placed them in an evidence bag. Dr. Miller, please wait here. We'll approach the house. The officers moved toward the Davidson residence, positioning themselves strategically around the property. Detective Wilson and another officer went to the front door, while the others covered potential escape routes. Dr. Miller watched as Detective Wilson knocked firmly on the door. No response. He knocked again, louder this time, announcing police presence. Still nothing. The officers exchanged glances. Detective Wilson spoke into his radio, and moments later the officers at the back of the house confirmed that they could see movement inside but no one approaching them. After several more attempts, Detective Wilson made a decision. We're going in, he announced to his team. Possible endangered minor inside. One officer brought forward a battering ram. They positioned it against the door, and with 3 solid blows, the door frame splintered and gave way. Dr. Miller remained at the perimeter as instructed, straining to see what was happening. The officers entered the house, their voices calling out, Police Oakwood Police Department. Neighbors had begun to emerge from their homes, drawn by the commotion. The couple next door to James, an older pair who had watched the earlier confrontation from their window, approached Dr. Miller. What's happening? The woman asked, clutching her robe, closed at the neck. Before Dr. Miller could answer, shouts erupted from inside the house, followed by officers rushing upstairs. Then came more shouting, this time from outside the house. They're on the roof, someone yelled. Dr. Miller looked up to see James climbing out of an attic window onto the roof above the garage. He was pulling Emily behind him, his grip tight on her wrist as she struggled to maintain her balance on the steep slope. Stay back, James yelled as he saw the officers below. I'll push her off if you come any closer. We're a family. If I'm going down, we're all going down together. Emily was crying, her free hand protectively covering her pregnant belly. Please don't, she begged, her voice carrying in the night air. Please help me. The police below immediately backed off, radioing for additional support. Dr. Miller heard them requesting paramedics in what sounded like an inflatable landing pad. James, Dr. Miller called out, stepping forward despite the officer's warning. Don't do this. The police have the photographs. They know everything. James's face contorted with rage. She gave you those pictures, you little bitch, he spat at Emily. After everything I've done for you, you don't deserve to live. A car screeched to a halt at the edge of the police perimeter. Sarah leapt out, rushing toward the house before an officer intercepted her. That's my daughter, she screamed, fighting against the officer's restraint. Emily, I'm here. Baby, I'm here. Emily's tear-streaked face turned toward her mother's voice, Mom. The momentary distraction was enough for James to pull Emily closer to the edge of the roof. The officers below had managed to deploy a large inflatable safety cushion, positioning it beneath where they stood. James Davidson. Detective Wilson called through a megaphone. This is Detective Wilson with the Oakwood Police Department. Release the girl and surrender yourself. There's nowhere for you to go. Dr. Miller could see officers now positioning themselves at the attic window, ready to apprehend James from behind. But James saw them too. Stay back, he shouted, yanking Emily closer to the edge. I'll jump with her if I have to. Sarah broke free from the officer holding her back. Please, James, she's our daughter. Don't hurt her. She's mine, James snarled. You never deserved her. You never deserved either of them. In that moment, Dr. Miller realized with horror that James was referring to both Emily and her unborn child as his possessions. His to control, his to destroy. The officers at the attic window began to emerge onto the roof. James, seeing his escape route blocked and the authorities closing in, made his decision. No, Dr. Miller shouted. But it was too late. James shoved Emily off the roof. She fell with a terrified scream, landing on the inflatable safety cushion below. Officers immediately rushed to her aid, while others surged toward James, who attempted to jump in a different direction to escape. He didn't make it far. 2 officers tackled him mid-leap, bringing him down onto the roof surface with enough force to knock the wind from him. They quickly handcuffed him and began the process of bringing him down safely, though with considerably less gentleness than they had shown Emily. Dr. Miller rushed to where Emily lay on the safety cushion, paramedics already checking her vital signs. I'm her doctor, he explained, kneeling beside her. Emily, can you hear me? Her eyes fluttered open, tears streaming down her face. The baby, she whispered. Is the baby okay? Dr. Miller placed a gentle hand on her abdomen, feeling for movement. Let's get you to the hospital to make sure, but I think she's going to be just fine. You were very brave, Emily. Very brave. The night air filled with the flashing lights of police cars and ambulances. Officers led a handcuffed James toward a waiting cruiser, his face contorted with rage as they passed. Sarah, who stood anxiously watching the paramedics, tend to Emily. James spat in her direction. This is your fault, he snarled. You were never a real mother to her. Sarah lunged forward, her composure shattering. You monster, what you did to our daughter, you're not human. An officer stepped between them, guiding Sarah back, while his colleagues pushed James toward the police car. He should rot in prison forever. Sarah sobbed as Dr. Miller approached her. I always knew something was wrong with him, but this, you couldn't have known. Dr. Miller said gently. Predators like James are experts at hiding their true nature. Collectively, the paramedics had stabilized Emily on a stretcher and were preparing to load her into the ambulance. Dr. Miller guided Sarah toward them. She needs you now, he said. Focus on Emily, not him. Sarah nodded, wiping tears from her face as she approached the stretcher. When Emily saw her mother, her eyes filled with fresh tears. Mom, she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. I missed you. Sarah took her daughter's hand, kissing it as tears streamed down her face. And I missed you too, baby, so much. I'm here now. And I'm never leaving you again. DeMiller approached the lead paramedic. I'm her physician. I'd like to accompany you to the hospital if that's all right. The paramedic nodded. We could use your input on her condition, doctor. As they loaded Emily into the ambulance, Detective Wilson approached Dr. Miller. Doctor, we'll need to speak with you at the hospital. And you too, ma'am, he added to Sarah. But for now, go with your daughter. We'll meet you there. Sarah climbed into the ambulance alongside Emily. Never letting go of her daughter's hand, Dr. Miller followed, sitting opposite them as the paramedics continued monitoring Emily's vital signs. In the ambulance, Dr. Miller used his stethoscope to listen to the baby's heartbeat. The heartbeat is still irregular, but it's strong, he told Emily. The fall doesn't seem to have caused any immediate trauma, but the hospital will do a more thorough examination. The ambulance sped through the quiet streets of Oakwood. Siren wailing, Dr. Miller watched as Sarah stroked Emily's hair, whispering reassurances. Despite the years of separation, their bond remained a testament to the resilience of family ties in the face of monstrous interference. They arrived at the hospital where an obstetric emergency team was waiting. Dr. Miller briefly explained the situation to the attending physician, Dr. Jennifer Collins, a specialist in high-risk pregnancies, 28 weeks with IUGR and fetal arrhythmia. He summarized as they wheeled Emily into an examination room. Also potential trauma from a fall, though she landed on an inflatable safety cushion. Dr. Collins nodded. We'll take it from here, Dr. Miller. Thank you for your quick action tonight. As the medical team began their work, Dr. Miller joined Sarah in the waiting area. Detective Wilson arrived shortly after, accompanied by another officer and a woman who introduced herself as Amanda Taylor from Child Protective Services. We need to understand exactly what happened tonight, Detective Wilson began. Dr. Miller, please start from the beginning. Dr. Miller recounted the events of the evening, from Emily's visit to his clinic to his growing concerns and eventual discovery of the truth through the photographs. James claimed the baby's father was a boyfriend, he explained. But Emily's comment at the clinic about the baby kicking when she heard his voice takes on a horrifying new meaning. Now, Detective Wilson nodded grimly. We found a hidden room in the basement, just as you suspected from what Emily told you. It appears to be where much of the abuse took place. There were cameras, recording equipment, and other items. Sarah covered her mouth, stifling a sob. His bedroom contained hundreds of photographs of Emily. The detective continued. Some dating back several years. This has been ongoing for a long time. How could this happen? Sarah asked, her voice breaking. How could no one notice? Predators like James are skilled at isolation and manipulation. Ms. Taylor from CPS explained, they gradually sever their victims' ties to support systems, friends, family, even school. We'll have a clearer picture once Emily is able to share her statement. Detective Wilson turned to Sarah. Miss Bennett, we need to understand how James gained custody of Emily. It might help us build a stronger case against him. Sarah wiped her eyes, her expression pained. I'm not proud of what happened. After James and I divorced 10 years ago, I was a single mom working nights at a casino. We were struggling financially. She drew in a steadying breath before continuing. I started attending underground poker games thinking I could stretch my paychecks and give Emily a better life, but it quickly spiraled into an addiction. One night the house was raided, and that's when the police found out I'd left Emily, just 7 years old at the time. Home alone, tears streamed down her face. James seized the opportunity. He portrayed himself as the stable, responsible parent. The court gave him custody, and I was only allowed supervised visitation. Then he moved to Oakwood and got a restraining order, claiming I was unstable and a bad influence on Emily. He systematically isolated her. Ms. Taylor nodded. It's a common tactic. I've spent the last 3 years rebuilding my life and moving to this neighborhood. Sarah said, I have a stable job now and an apartment with a second bedroom ready for Emily. I've been saving every penny I could to fight for custody again, but James shut down every attempt I made to reach her. Dr. Collins emerged from the examination room before anyone could respond. They all turned to her expectantly. Emily is stable, she reported. The baby's heartbeat remains irregular, but we've started her on medication to help with that. We've also begun steroid injections to accelerate fetal lung maturity, which is crucial in cases of IUGR. She's severely malnourished and showing signs of long-term stress and trauma, but physically she should recover. And the baby, as Sarah asked, we're monitoring the situation closely. Dr. Collins said the next 48 hours will be critical. The fall doesn't appear to have caused any placental abruption, which is good news, but the pre-existing conditions, the growth restriction and heart irregularities remain concerning. Can we see her, Dr. Miller? Asked. Dr. Collins nodded. She's asking for her mother, and you too, Dr. Miller. She says you saved her life. The hospital room was dimly lit, the steady beeping of monitors creating a rhythmic backdrop. Emily lay propped up on pillows, an IV in her arm, and fetal monitors strapped across her swollen abdomen. Despite everything she had endured, there was something different about her now, a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The weight of her secret had been lifted. Sarah approached her daughter's bedside, her steps tentative, as if afraid Emily might disappear. Emily, she whispered gently, taking her daughter's hand. My brave, beautiful girl. Emily's eyes welled with tears. Mom, she said, her voice stronger than it had been earlier. You came back for me. I never stopped trying to come back, Sarah assured her, perching carefully on the edge of the bed. Your father, he made it impossible, but that's over now. He can never hurt you again. Miller stood respectfully at the foot of the bed, giving mother and daughter space for their reunion. Detective Wilson and Miss Taylor from CPS waited near the door, understanding the delicacy of the moment. After a few minutes, Emily looked up at Dr. Miller. Thank you, she said simply, for believing me, for helping us. You're the brave one, Emily, Dr. Miller replied. You found the courage to reach out for help, and that's what saved you and your baby. Detective Wilson stepped forward. Emily, I know this is difficult, but we need to ask you some questions to help build our case against your father. Would that be okay? Emily glanced at her mother, who squeezed her hand reassuringly. It's your choice, sweetheart. Whatever you decide, I'm right here with you. Emily nodded slowly. I want to tell the truth, all of it. Take your time, Miss Taylor said gently, and if you need to stop at any point, just say so. Emily took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice gaining strength as she continued. There was never any boyfriend. She confirmed what they already suspected. My father, he's the father of my baby too. She described how James had begun abusing her shortly after gaining full custody, how he had systematically isolated her from the outside world. He pulled me out of school saying he would homeschool me, but there were never any real lessons, just enough so I could answer basic questions. If anyone asked, the abuse had escalated over the years. Whenever anyone came to the house, he would lock me in the basement. There's a hidden room there that he built. That's where most of it happened. Dr. Miller thought of the evidence the police had found in that basement room and felt a wave of nausea. When I got pregnant, Emily continued, he was angry at first. He talked about forcing me to have an abortion, but then he changed his mind. He became protective of the baby. He said it was ours. She shuddered at the memory. The baby started kicking a few months ago. I noticed she would kick whenever she heard his voice. It made me sick. I hated that she responded to him. Emily placed a protective hand over her belly. But it's not her fault. She's innocent in all this. Of course she is. Sarah assured her. I started feeling really sick about 2 weeks ago, Emily explained. Bad stomach pains and dizziness. At first he ignored it, but when I could barely get out of bed, he finally decided to take me to a doctor. That's when we went to Dr. Miller's clinic. Detective Wilson nodded, taking notes. The photographs you gave to Dr. Miller. How did you manage to get those, my father? He took pictures all the time, she said softly. He kept them in a box in his closet. I snuck some out while he was in the shower this evening, before we left for the clinic, knowing he would be out of the house to take us there. It's been a really long time since he let me go outside. I didn't know what to do with the pictures, whom to trust, but when Dr. Miller came to our house, I thought maybe he could help. You did exactly the right thing, Miller assured her. Collins returned to check on Emily and evaluate the fetal monitoring strips. The medication seems to be helping with the heart irregularities, she reported, and your own vital signs are stabilizing. Emily, that's excellent news. What happens now? Emily asked, looking between the adults in the room. Miss Taylor stepped forward. You'll stay in the hospital until you're medically cleared to leave. After that, we'll need to determine the best living situation for you and your baby. She's coming home with me, Sarah said firmly. I've prepared for this for years. I have a room for her, savings for her care. Everything. Ms. Taylor nodded. Given the circumstances, that seems like the most appropriate placement. We'll need to conduct a home evaluation, but as long as everything checks out, I don't foresee any issues with Emily being placed in your care. And what about my father? Emily asked hesitantly. He's in custody, Detective Wilson assured her. Given the evidence, we've already collected the photographs. The hidden room, your testimony, he'll be facing. Multiple felony charges, child abuse, sexual assault, incest, child endangerment, and more. He won't be getting out of prison for a very, very long time. Emily nodded, a mix of emotions crossing her face. Relief, sadness, and something like closure. What about the baby, Bum? She asked, turning to Dr. Collins. Will she be okay? We're doing everything we can, Dr. Collins promised. The next few weeks will be crucial. We'll continue the steroid injections to help her lungs develop, monitor her heart closely, and focus on improving your nutrition to give her the best chance possible. I want to keep her, Emily said quietly, surprising everyone in the room. I know I'm young, but she's not responsible for how she came into this world. I don't want her to suffer for what he did. Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand. We'll raise her together, she promised. You, me, and your daughter, she'll be loved and protected always and always. As the night deepened, Detective Wilson and Miss Taylor departed, promising to return the following day. Dr. Collins completed her examination and left to check on other patients. Sarah settled into the chair beside Emily's bed, unwilling to leave her daughter's side even for a moment. Dr. Miller prepared to leave as well, his professional duties fulfilled, but his heart still heavy with the weight of everything he had witnessed. Dr. Miller, Emily called as he reached the door. Thank you for listening, for seeing that something was wrong. He turned back to her, struck by the resilience in her young face. I'm just glad I could help. You did more than help, Sarah said. You saved them both when everyone else looked away. As Dr. Miller drove home in the early hours of the morning, the streets of Oakwood quiet and empty, he reflected on the events of the night. His decision to follow his instincts, to push past professional boundaries when a child's welfare was at stake, had made all the difference. The neighborhood was silent when he returned. The Davidson house, now a crime scene, yellow police tape marking its boundaries. Neighbors would wake to a changed street, a community forced to reckon with the horror that had existed in their midst unnoticed for years. DeMiller entered his home exhausted, but at peace with the choices he had made. In the medical profession, the mandate was clear. First, do no harm, but sometimes doing good required more than just avoiding harm. It required action, courage, and the willingness to see what others missed. As he finally lay down to rest, Miller thought of Emily and her unborn daughter, both victims of unspeakable cruelty, both now with a chance at a new beginning, their road to home. Healing would be long and difficult, but they would not walk it alone. Sometimes he reflected as sleep finally claimed him. The most important diagnosis was the one that went beyond medical symptoms, the one that recognized the human suffering, awe beneath the surface. The silent cries for help that came in the form of averted eyes, cryptic words, and brave acts of desperate trust. In the end, it wasn't just medical knowledge that saved lives. It was compassion, attention, a tone, and the courage to act when others turned away. As Dr. Miller finally found rest that night, his actions remind us of something essential we all learned in our professional lives, but sometimes forget in retirement, that true vigilance often requires us to step beyond our comfort zones. His story resonates particularly with those of us who've spent careers in medicine, law enforcement, or education, fields where we're trained to recognize distress signals in those who cannot speak freely. But it's a lesson for every one of us, regardless of background. Many predators count on our collective hesitation, our unwillingness to get involved or make a scene. They weaponize our social programming against the very people who need our intervention most. The horror that existed within the Davidson household had been hiding in plain sight for years. The neighbors who noticed something off but said nothing. The school officials who accepted James's excuses without follow-up. The courts that granted custody without sufficient oversight. Each represented a missed opportunity to save Emily years of abuse. As men of our generation, we were often taught to mind our own business. But some situations demand that we set aside that programming and act with moral courage. Because sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply refuse to look away. I'm Dr. Michael Thompson, and I hope this account has given you something to think about. Perhaps even the courage to act should you ever find yourself in a position to help someone who cannot help themselves. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.